Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 5 of the Dandelion Conversation series brought to you by the Yellow Farmhouse Education Center and the Farm-Based Education Network. As always, a special thank you to Chelsea Groton Foundation for help making this series possible. Last week, we were joined by Woody Woodruff of Red Wiggler Community Farm, a social care farm located in Maryland. Today, we're going to be talking with Ceci Pineda, Executive Director of BK Rot. BK Rot is a community-centered, closed-loop, fossil fuel-free approach to hauling and composting food waste in New York City with principles and values rooted in environmental justice. BK Rot creates space for the leadership of young people of color who disproportionately face consequences of environmental destruction and yet whose visions and values are often excluded from the urban sustainability policy. Ceci came to BK Rot in 2016 as a pickup household member and volunteer. Ceci fell in love with compost through BK Rot and the New York City Master Composter course. In 2017, Ceci joined the BK Rot Advisory Board and then became a member in 2018. Ceci is adamant about addressing deep climate inequities, and finds hope in community practices that further land regeneration and reciprocally heal our communities. They also deepen their relationships with plant friends and food justice work through apprenticing at Soulfire Farm and volunteering at Hattie Carthern Hebron Farm as well. So I'd like to introduce Ceci to our chat for today. How are you?
Hey, good, thanks. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Awesome. We can pretty much just hop right into our questions. So I know I already went over a little bit in the introduction, but hoping to hear a little bit more from you. So how did you first get involved with the BK Rot composting program?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I first got involved here. I found like a couple of pictures from back in 2016, 2017 of just being involved in the compost process itself. And I think for me, I'd come also from doing some organizing or fighting specifically around queer and trans people of color, like liberation or creating our own safe spaces, as well as trying to think about how we can face the climate crisis. And for me, getting involved in the physical process of composting felt like this active way of participating in transformation. And I also got to build relationships with like a lot of the youth there who were working at that time, and just seeing, I got really invested in BK Rot and the work, especially seeing how much leadership and autonomy they give to youth in those spaces, and youth who usually aren't given a space where either they're allowed to like show up in their whole selves or to their full potential.
Awesome. Seems like just from the research that I've done, seems like all the work that you guys are doing is like really awesome. I guess, let's see, my next question is going to be, what is a typical day like of one of your food waste haulers? I know that a lot of it is bike powered, so instead of doing pickups with cars, how is the typical day, and how did you choose to go with bike pickup instead of like another form of transportation?
Yeah, so as you can see in the picture here, we use a trailer with a bike, as well as we have in the right corner, you'll see like an electric cargo trike. And so our founder, Sandy Nurse, really believed in creating something that models more of this just transition. And so we have so much truck traffic in North Brooklyn, or that's like an issue of like our waste industry. And so how can we use different mediums and create like accessible employment opportunities too? And I'll just show really quick part of this video, which I love, that kind of shows one of our riders going out to do a residential route. So this is what it looks like, picking the food scraps up and then bringing it back to our site, or some bring it back directly and they process it. And so after they come back, they weigh it. We do commercial as well as residential pickup. And so we keep track of how many food scraps we're diverting or coming through our systems. And this is on the left, it's our residential service, where we have right now over 330 members in our household service. And
that's fantastic.
I'm not sure exactly how many commercial accounts we have right now because we've been growing a little bit. we dropped from like around 12 or 9 to like 4 with the pandemic last year, but now they've been coming back. And oh yeah, I think that's it for now.
Perfect. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So I've been to New York a couple of times. I know that all the traffic there can get pretty crazy. So it seems like a really good idea to be able to, not only are you like reducing the emissions that you're able to, or that you'd be generating, but it's also probably a lot easier to navigate through that traffic on a bike instead of in a big pickup truck or something like that.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just add, I mean, New York City's commercial waste has been very unregulated, and there was actually just major legislation that passed in 2019 to kind of reform that. But used to have the same street could have like 10 to 12 different waste trucks going down just based on the businesses. And so we believe that like through biking or through dealing with waste in this more localized way, it's just a more efficient system, and it's less harmful both for the environment and creating like less pollution for the folks who live in our neighborhoods.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, I guess now we can sort of get more into like the actual composting, actual practicing of it. So can you speak a little bit more about like your composting methods, like what techniques that you use? And also, where are you actually doing the composting in the city?
Great. Yeah, I might switch back to showing slides one more time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is at one of our gardens, No Wastelands. And so what essentially we'll do, you can see Victor and Sonia doing this work of just emptying out the food scraps that we collect. We chop it up. Then we also use wood chips that come from a lot of like local city trees and sawdust from also local wood shops. But those are our main browns or our more carbon-rich materials, which we then mix in with our more nitrogen-rich materials, or what we call in the compost world our greens. And we used to have a bin system. You can see in these pictures, there's some of the bins, but now we do mostly a windrow-based system. And so these are two like 25-foot long windrows, and each week our team will be turning one of them fully. And so essentially, this is actually like a view of like the older part of the composting system that they're turning. It's continuously this way, like food waste is continuously moving through our system. With like the front of the windrow will have a fresh batch of scraps, and we just alternate between each windrow each week. And so we're now able to process with this system. And also last year we started partnering with more community gardens, and Green Acres is pictured in the left. And then we did some windrows at Good Life Garden. And that compost produced also just goes out to those gardens or to their like community members too. And we've continued partnering with Green Acres. And this year we're also with Good Life Garden and another garden, Aberdeen, that's located a little bit more in southern Brooklyn.
Gosh, perfect. It's great that you have like enough space to actually be able to have like full windrows in the cities, considering how like just congested and crowded it can be. Yeah, that's awesome to see. Perfect. So my next question is more like how do your youth volunteers end up, or how do they end up like learning more about the organization and getting involved? Are they usually just like, are they coming from like one area, or are they sort of hearing about it in multiple different ways? Or
yeah, I would say in different ways. Like definitely we try to do a lot of outreach, especially on the block, or we let the local like high schools know. And as we started to work with more partner gardens, also calling on those gardens and community members to support as well in getting the word out. And we've also built up a social media presence. So a lot of times someone is like, oh, my friend saw this and told me that I should apply. So I feel like people here through word of mouth and social media are also their like teachers.
Got you. Perfect. Sweet. So sort of going based off of that like youth movement, seems like the basic structure of your organization is pretty like youth-led and young people-led, which can be kind of like rare for like most organizations, considering you have like a board of directors and all of that. What sort of benefits have you seen from having like sort of younger generation of people coming up with the ideas and sort of trying to shape this organization?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for like full transparency that like these past years, it's felt also like sometimes our operations are more youth led than the
Mhm.
organization itself, since there's still like so much around finance and so many other things that you need to just like be a nonprofit or these types of organization. But we are thinking about or making like big decisions too, and thinking about how we can create like a structure that allows for more youth autonomy and youth leadership, even like so for example, like this year having youth involved in setting like our annual budget or different like
Mhm.
elements in that way. Um, or even thinking about like maybe the youth are interested in having like a worker owned youth co-op, but that takes again a lot of investment and also supporting capacity building. So I think it's finding that balance. But for us, yeah, it is really powerful because a lot of times we give supportive supervision, but we're not there every hour that the youth are working or turning windrows. We're obviously
Mhm.
not following them on bikes on their pickups, and so there's a lot of ways that youth like move up into troubleshooting, into proposing ideas as to how they think systems might work better. And so I think what's really affirming for them is like if when they start proposing things and seeing changes implemented, they're like, oh, like uh, what my opinion or my voice or these ideas and how to make things better are valued here, and just allows them to like really continue growing in like leadership in a very like organic way.
Perfect. I like it. Uh, yeah, just like a lot of the time, you have like these organizations that are, it's sort of hard to be able to move up and actually like see the results of like the ideas that you're putting forward. So it's great that, yeah, like you actually have, or people are able to do that there.
Mhm.
Awesome. Um, so yeah, I got a couple more questions. Where do you see sort of like the future of localized urban composting and just dealing with food waste in cities in general?
Yeah, so I feel like in New York City we're pretty behind compared to like other places, but I think if I could just dream of what it looks like, I would definitely think um of micro composting systems that also fit like the neighborhoods or areas that they're a part of. And so
Mhm.
say for example, you could have in New York City we have these mass residential buildings, and there's now also a lot of composting technology where there are machines that could take that and devolumize it or start processing it, and either creating something that people could then integrate. But I guess what I'm saying is like figure out what solution works for each place or on this more localized scale, and then also create employment opportunities for people from those neighborhoods to be the ones who are managing those systems.
Mhm.
And then whatever is produced could go back into those local communities to support growing projects, or they could sell it. Like there's just so many opportunities for um, that just like support the environment and communities. um, I would also love to see even like um, there's talks of maybe there's like these centralized locations where people bring their like food waste. I do think that the way in which we collect recycling and trash, we should have local ways of capturing organic waste, and
Yeah.
also we have definitely so much capacity to do more compost processing. So how then can you get those food scraps to transform locally? Yeah, and I think as much as you can, and when we make it in this localized or micro way, uh,
Mhm.
and I think when people are actually able to like see or engage with the process of composting, it's composting is an incredibly magical thing. I mean, you go to these piles and it's like, or at least in a lot of windrow or bin based composting, it gets to like
Mhm.
140, 60 degrees inside of these
Yeah.
piles, and you see so much transformation, so much life, or even the act of participating in it can be a lot of fun when done in community. And so I think just giving people access to that magic and seeing also how wasteful we are, it can create so many ripples of change in our communities for sure.
Mhm. I think I was doing some research, and I think in Connecticut alone, like every year, there's roughly like I think over 500,000 tons of food waste just generated in like this one state alone. New York, I'm sure, is pretty similar up there.
Yeah, and I think like here, over a third of our residential waste and of our commercial waste is like compostable. And New York City is definitely like the most wasteful city in the world, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, it's a lot.
Awesome. So could you sort of bring us through the process from start to finish? So it goes, so someone picks it up, hauler picks it up at someone's house, and then it gets brought back to No Wasteland. Or do you have another location where you're able to compost, or is it just at that one site?
Yeah, so recently we've been growing just because of the demand for residential composting or just composting services in general. But yeah, I guess typically it's like our haulers or our riders will go out. They'll either bring it to No Wastelands Garden, or right now there's a couple of riders who go in Bed-Stuy and bring it to Green Acres, another partner garden we have, and they will like immediately weigh it, do a big processing batch, and maintain the bin system. Like they do all of that in one day, and their system probably like they have like around like 50 houses, I would say, um, that compost system like services, as well as like members for that community garden too. And then anyways, for when we bring it onto No Wasteland, same thing of its weight. And then we usually store it until like one processing day a week, where we lay down all of the wood chips. We put in the mix of the materials, the food scraps, and also sprinkle in some sawdust, mix it all up and add it to our windrow. And so some staff are bikers, some staff are composters, some staff do both. And so it just kind of also depends on what roles youth are interested in taking. But yeah, essentially once it goes through, there's the whole compost system management. So as I said, these are pretty big windrows and they're turned once a week. And then it goes through, compost has to sit for 4 weeks before it can be sifted, or at least 4 weeks. And after that, we have someone else who manages our finished composts. So Shaq, the youth who oversees that, will sift all the compost. He organizes like compost pickups, as well as communicates with like retail stores when we're doing sales as well, or when they're interested. Essentially, like retail stores also, some of them know to like what they can order from us as well.
Gotcha.
But otherwise, like that, I would say only like 5% of our compost goes to retail. The rest is really for community gardens, community members, people who are doing backyard growing or soil restoration projects.
Perfect. That leads me into my next question. What do you do with the compost? Do you sell it? Perfect. So when is it given out to people for free if they're working in the community gardens, or do you still sell it for a purchase or for profit?
Yeah, so for people who come by, it's donation based. Like we say, for anyone on the block, it's like free. For the local gardens that host us, like they get all the compost, or also like this is also only the compost that's produced at No Wastelands. At other partners like Green Acres, Good Life, and now Aberdeen or others, like they get to do whatever they want with the compost that's finished. Also because like I think there's another big part of like the labor on our end of just sifting the compost that comes out of No Wastelands. And so I think for us too, we encourage people to both pay for the service and like when it comes to the pickup, as well as for them to donate for this compost, because it literally like it takes so much labor to transform something from food waste to the compost. And so we're also showing that there's like value for this. There's value for like the youth who did this work to make this happen. But yeah, so for retail stores, we charge like maybe like $5 for a bag that's like this big. And for if people pick it up, you get like, you know, a massive bag for like $3 to $5 suggested donation.
Nice.
And yeah, and we do some deliveries to some community gardens, which are like grant funded once a year to either gardens in Bed-Stuy or around the area. But that takes a lot of work. And so sometimes we've experimented also like there's one garden that ordered like 10 cubic yards for us, which is a lot for us. But just like we would do deliveries on our electric cargo trike like once a week or something for them.
Okay. Great. Another question, how much compost are you able to produce in, let's say, like a year, for example, with all like the food scraps that's coming in? What's like the total amount or the total volume that you're able to generate?
I would say like over like 50 tons of compost.
That's awesome. And roughly, and that's coming from like about how much food waste or food scraps are sort of creating that compost.
Our organic waste total is like 109-ish tons like last year and the year before. This year, I think we're gonna surpass that number too. But that's also includes like our brown inputs and food scraps
Okay.
themselves. It's probably similar, like 50 to 65 tons or so. And what else was it? We also had, or probably maybe even a little bit more, but this year, because another element aside from our partner gardens is the food waste that we collect on Sundays at our drop off.
Mhm.
So in 2019, our average was like we would collect 500 pounds in 3 hours, which is like a pretty solid amount. It'd be like these 3 toters. Last year during the pandemic, that doubled to like 1,100 something was like our average, and this year we're already like getting 2,000 pounds in that 3 hour window, which is
Wow.
a lot of food waste. And just like, yeah, that's, I think, I forget, like maybe it's over 10 pounds a minute or something.
Mhm.
But because it's so much for us, our youth mostly just take out contaminants and chop it up. And then we partner with Big Reuse, which they're a bigger nonprofit that has sites that are machine based in the city to process food waste. They'll process like 80 to 100 toters in a week. And so we right now have like 9 toters that we fill up on Sundays, and they
Mhm.
pick those up.
Awesome. Great. So let's see. I got a few more questions. What advice or what like tips, I guess, would you give to someone who is trying to reduce their food waste at home but might not have access to a compost pickup service like BK Rot? How would you recommend that they could sort of reduce their food waste or lower the impact that they're sort of creating on the planet?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that probably first just like look to see what's going on in your neighborhood or community. Because I mean, if you live in the city, for example, maybe there's not a service like BK Rot, but there might be like gardens where composting is happening. If you live in a more rural area, I'm not sure if maybe like neighbors compost, but
Mhm.
yeah, I think composting is actually something. It's something that occurs naturally in the earth, and it's something that we as humans can be stewards of as well. And so I think it depends on what you have access to. Like if you're reduced to indoors, there's a few different options of like indoor composting systems that could work for you. Like
Mhm.
I've heard, like I know folks who have done like worm bins or vermicomposting, or
Yep.
I know there was like this popular article from the New York Times about someone composting from home out of this like cardboard box, and I forget what else they put into it to compost.
Interesting.
But there's a lot of possibilities, and I think if you're outside too, but my favorite and what I would recommend is just also talking to neighbors or community, or figuring out like a community scale way of creating compost, just because it starts to become so much more efficient when you're working on a
Mhm.
community level, and there are so many other benefits or goods that are provided from like community scale composting, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
building those relationships, sharing or working like across labor, and also just the fact that it's like your temperature piles can get like a lot hotter. It will community composting in itself creates for like more efficient composting.
Mhm.
But people could also, you could have your backyard tumbler, or
Yeah.
so many possibilities.
Got you. Perfect. I know that you had worked at Soulfire Farm and had done some other volunteer farm work. Do you feel that sort of like your work at those organizations sort of set you up to be more interested in composting, or how did you feel like that connected you to where you are now?
Yeah, I think I was involved with BK Rot maybe before I started getting involved with those other, well, with Hattie Carthen, I guess it was early too. I think for
Mhm.
me, it's like, um, yeah, the core reason also why I do this work is because of like the climate crisis too, which is something that I think for me I've been um, like anxious or concerned or trying to address for like over 10 years now. And I think just through working in different environments, I began to realize that for myself, what feels like um, the thing that will continue to give me hope, or where I can put my most work, is being involved in community-based projects that work to support the land and being more resilient or repairing like our relationships with the land too. And for me also, especially thinking about, especially for like Black and Brown Indigenous folks who our relationships to land has been violently ruptured and to the earth.
Yeah.
And composting is something that is so ancestral and was practiced like in all of our lineages. And so for me, coming back to composting and to farm work and to earth work in this community way, like I'm able to feel and see transformation. I feel like I'm able to repair or come back to these relationships that feel so familiar and give me so much, and also know that the work that we are doing is either mitigating climate impacts, or supporting us to adapt and mitigating our own emissions as well, right? Like when we bring food waste to landfills, it creates methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, or when those are trucks contribute to this. So I think for me, it was really about feeling that core call of my work to like work around healing the land and communities.
Great, perfect. Have you had like any sort of like challenges, or what has been like the biggest challenge to get people sort of into that mindset of like composting is sort of just as a way to like regenerate the earth? What sort of challenges have you faced like trying to get people to start composting?
I think it's hard. It's really hard in a place like New York City. Like, yeah, we've had these conversations with like the youth of like, like that won't speak to like people in my neighborhood or my community, or not everyone will. And so I think it is challenging, or I feel like we live in a society that has taught us to like care about ourselves, that so many people are incredibly disconnected from their waste. Like we throw trash all over the place. We don't see trash as something belonging to us or that we have a relationship with. And so, or people think composting will bring like rats or smells. And so I think it is about having these deeper conversations, or also finding different points of entry for folks. Like it could even be something as simple as a conversation starter about like how your trash would smell a lot less if you're separating out that stuff and bringing it to being composted, or but I think people starting to be involved, or honestly seeing like youth leading this work is very like powerful. And I think for youth too who come onto our site, like they're seeing a bunch of youth who look like them doing this work, and so it allows yourself to visualize yourself doing it too.
Perfect. What does so I'm sure that there's like some sort of training for the micro haulers. What does that typically entail? How do you get people from just I guess volunteers to being actual micro haulers working for the organization?
Yeah, so for that specifically, I think we usually hire for them versus like, but yes, our training involves like safety training for folks, or some people don't know how to ride a bike, so it's also even thinking about an example of like right now we have youth who are participating in our youth leaders program, which is a summer fall program where youth learn more about climate justice and environmental justice, why we do this work, but also they come with like, people are like, I'm afraid to ride a bike, or like I'll only ride on the sidewalk to like a little bit more comfort. And so we first practice or build familiarity with like riding, or maybe when we have different programs or workshops, folks who are more comfortable riding will bike together to different places, and then eventually as they start to like build comfort, they'll take on trying on a residential route. But they definitely all of our riders go through like a bike safety training as well, like on an annual basis too. And then we don't have people who are like, people don't just jump into like the electric cargo trike, which is bigger and it's a little bit different. But after they build enough familiarity with like bike and trailer, if they're interested in learning, they can also be trained on how to operate the e-trikes as well.
Gosh, perfect. Awesome. I guess let's see.
I'm gonna turn on the light also because I realize it's a little dark in here.
Quick sip of water. And got one of our first questions coming in. Can you tell us more about how you find your residential and commercial clients, and do they pay to have their compost removed?
Yeah, so they do pay to have our compost picked up, and we used to, when BK Rot was started in 2013. So now we've been around for some years, and in the beginning, there was a lot of community outreach, getting people to know that we existed, a lot of visits, but now people are more familiar with our services. So for residential clients, like, we don't worry about finding them because they are finding us for the most part. And for our commercial clients, sometimes we also have like for a while, our capacity to process compost was smaller than the demand for our services. So we definitely have like this waiting list of people who are interested, or word of mouth commercial clients will talk to each other. It's a lot of businesses who I would say are like looking for composting options that then end up finding us or other micro haulers. However, we have at times done research or gone out to places that we're like, this group or this business seems like they would be a great fit, or like they're part of the community. They produce a lot of organic waste, etc., or like maybe they would be interested. So I would say it's more of those types of like on the grounds connection.
Got you.
And just having like an online presence.
Okay.
They do pay both. We have like a sliding scale model for our residential service, and for our commercial service, we're also trying to implement something like sliding scale based on zone, also for folks to pay.
Got you. So, I guess how much from like your typical household, how much waste or how much food waste are they generating? How much are you collecting from each house? Roughly.
House, it can definitely range like from 5 to like 15 pounds or something like that. So
gotcha. Okay.
It definitely depends. Yeah.
So another thing, I feel like over the pandemic, people were starting to get more into just like gardening and being a little bit more like conscious about the environment. Did you see like a spike in residential clients over the course of the pandemic, trying to like reduce their food waste?
Definitely.
Just try something new.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, like our drop-off rates like more than doubled when the pandemic started, or like a lot of people wanted to compost. There was also the cities had a big cut in their composting options, so I think it was also like we're not city funded necessarily, so we have more money to keep operating, and then and we had a very big uptick on the demand for our residential pickup service for sure too.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Awesome. So I think we can probably start taking a couple questions from our audience right now. So let's put this one up and see what we can do. So there is perception among the public that composting can attract vermin. How do you allay people's concerns about doing this in an urban environment?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, in my personal sphere, I'd always say like rats exist everywhere, or they are everywhere. They're part of New York City's ecosystem, and they do have sometimes like an association with composting, when really I'm like, any vacant spaces, like rats are there. They're in so many places. But anyways, there are different things we do for pest management, and actually, or some composters talk about like this myth of rats being associated with composting, because really, like, if you are putting your organic waste into a trash or something that's like on the curb, there's much more likely to increase like rats in like that area than what we do is like we're literally chopping up these scraps after we collect them, or we at BK Rot, we put them in these airtight containers until our processing day. And then we're literally chopping up and we're mixing it with sawdust and wood chips, making it more inaccessible. The inside again gets to like 100 and something degrees on the inside. And then we also, and a lot of places will put like, if it's a bin system, they'll put a thick seal of like wood chips, or they have their bins lined with chicken wire or different things to make it inaccessible for rats. For us, we use like a very thick seal of like wood chips that are around like 1/2 foot to a foot. To reduce odors or make it also less accessible for them to like crawl in to access that space. So there's a lot of ways, I would say to that question, it's like there's a lot of ways to actually do pest management. Good composting that's well managed shouldn't be like necessarily like this haven for rats or something else. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've stuck my hand into a couple compost piles in the past, and just the temperature that you feel is like, even if you just scrape away like the first couple inches or so, compared to just like sticking your hand all the way in, like the temperature change is amazing. And yeah, everything's just like all those microbes breaking everything down, taking those nutrients out and turning it into a brown gold essentially.
For sure. Yeah, and also like, rats like undisturbed places, and so if you're constantly like, you as a composter, you should be maintaining your bins or your systems like at least once a week, and so that's constantly disturbing the space. And so I think it's just like I guess I could see how if people are just leaving food scraps outside, or if that's the association, that definitely would attract rats. But if you're composting them, not so much.
Got you. Perfect. Our next question. Would composting ever not be possible in a certain environment because of like temperature, weather, animals, or any other factor? Or is it pretty much, you can do it pretty much anywhere?
I would love to say you can do it. It's like hard to imagine a place where you couldn't, just because like, the earth is like the #1 natural composter. And so like everywhere has a way of composting. I do know places where it's more challenging, or I've had friends be like, what about bears or different things? But I know there's always like a possible solution that I think you could use. So for example, with bears, like you could try bokashi or pre-fermenting food and putting it in a tumbler or something that's inaccessible, and then like essentially and then you bring it out into an outdoor system where it's not palatable anymore, like it's so broken down. So I definitely think there are these ways, and in super hot temperatures, I think that would be also easier. It might be very uncomfortable or too hot to manage composting systems. And in the cold, it's the compost system itself that's like generating the heat. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would imagine maybe it's the most challenging in the Arctic. I don't know. I can't tell, but I'd be actually interested to know about composting there. That question opened up that curiosity.
Awesome. Yeah, it's like I guess like just with farming in general and like composting, it's just it leaves room for so much like creativity and just as ways to try to solve these problems.
For sure, troubleshooting.
And let's see. I think we can find a couple more questions coming up. Did you have any more images or videos that you wanted to show?
I think we had talked about maybe showing that one video where, like, I think it features one of our youth workers, Bree.
Okay.
That might be. I think that's a cool visual to see, or what it. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, we can get that queued up.
Houses and businesses in the area. It's been amazing. I think it's a very meditative but also rewarding experience to just take all of this food that could potentially be going to waste in the landfill and staying there for years and years, but we come and take it back and make it into something new that can be used to grow all these amazing fruits and vegetables and flowers and trees and all this stuff.
When we compost, instead of our food waste ending up in a landfill where it produces the powerful greenhouse gas of methane, instead we divert those emissions and we create a finished product that actually helps store carbon in the soils. We process between 8,000 and 12,000 pounds of food waste a month. In New York City, over a third of our residential waste stream goes to landfills. Landfills that are based right by communities of color, increasing the local air pollution. When we collect all of this food waste by bike, we are creating like a mini ecosystem in which we are taking those food scraps versus having to have these trucks that a lot of times emit more air pollutants to our community.
My role at BK Raw is basically like two main things. One is turning windrows and sifting fresh compost. On Sundays, we have bike routes, and I pick up food scraps from houses, and there are also businesses in the area that leave out food scraps as well.
It's been really powerful to see the amount of respect which people place onto our youth workers, seeing mostly Black and brown youth who are dealing with people's trash basically and helping to transform it, I think really reconceptualizes in people's minds the value and the power that youth of color have.
Especially now, so many people need food. There's just so much food that's like going to waste that could be eaten by people. It's good that we're getting food to turn into compost. It's like not going to a landfill, but it's still a lot of food. When we weigh it, it's 50 pounds or upwards, 3,000 pounds sometimes in a week.
BK Rot was started in 2013 by Sandy Nurse as a response to a lack of composting options, high waste infrastructure, and a lack of employment opportunities for youth in our neighborhoods. So for Black and brown communities in New York City, we usually find higher concentrations of waste and less access to fresh, high quality food. We're helping to deal with our waste in a way that doesn't harm our communities and also creating a finished product that helps grow a super nutrient rich foods that can then nourish us. Something that I've always been inspired by at BK Rot is the way in which it holds youth up to their highest power. We're not micromanaging youth, but rather we give them their responsibilities and the supportive structures for them to rise up and meet those challenges. Where there weren't hardly any composting options available to the community, now people know that they can go to us, whether it's dropping off their food scraps at our public food scrap hours, or signing up for our pickup service, or coming to our site to get our compost, which now has a rep of being very high quality and good for the soil.
The coolest part about compost is you get to see something really beautiful come out of it.
Perfect. Great, yeah. So that was just a great overview of sort of like a rundown of what you guys do, which is awesome to see. Yeah, it's great to actually like see everything like happening in person and just like all the youth who are involved in it. I feel like you don't often see just very youth-led movement, so that's really exciting to see. So you've got a couple more questions. And so what other types of businesses aside from like restaurants use your composting services?
Yeah, I would say it's mostly coffee shops or different restaurants. We do have like a flower shop, which might come on soon. And we have had in the past too, like folks who do maybe like their work offices or something like that. And they also have us pick up from us. Last year, we also were doing it for free too, of picking up from different like mutual aid groups that were doing food distribution that would sometimes have a lot of food waste after that too. But yeah.
Perfect. And then does your like
also, sorry, we do have the Park Slope Food Co-op and Green Hill Food Co-op, so we have some like grocery stores also that we collect from as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I feel like grocery stores anywhere where there's like a like ready-made meal section is gonna generate a lot of waste. Perfect. So I got one or two more questions. Does your composting process slow down in the winter when like the temps are low, or does the heat of the compost just sort of keep everything going?
No, I mean, that's the thing that like, and why I think composting can happen anywhere. It's because it's the fungi and the microorganisms that are creating that heat. It's not the outside conditions, but they their digestive systems are external, so they excrete enzymes to break this down so their bodies can reabsorb it. And that reaction happening, or all of that energy and then breaking it down, is what causes those incredible temperatures. So we are year round. We go through the winter. Our team actually, our processing team at least, prefers the winter to the summer because at least it's not hot outside and on the inside. Yeah.
Perfect. And we got our next question already queued up. So do you need to put fertilizer in a garden if you add compost to it? Or what types of nutrients are you adding by adding your compost to it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I think it depends on every soil, what it will need for like its like recipe. And there, you know, I think I mean, a lot of farms actually, they do soil tests like annually or once a year to try to figure out what nutrients are missing or what they need. Compost is definitely an alternative to fertilizer. And I think it does have like a lot of like nitrogen, as well as like phosphorus as well. But sometimes actually it could have maybe if you apply it too much, it might be too much phosphorus for certain plants. And so I think it does depend on you knowing both like what soils are you adding it to, as what their composition is, as well as what plants or crops you're going to be growing there too, because some will take up more of some nutrients than others. And so it's definitely a balance. But compost, I think, is a great alternative. Like, people show us pictures of the things that they're growing from BK Rock compost, and it looks they're thriving. Yes.
Perfect. Great. Then it's more of a question directed at you. So when you were younger, did you see yourself ending up in this field, or was this basically what you wanted to do when you were younger?
I don't think I knew what I wanted to do when I was younger. I loved playing outside for sure. So I'm glad my work continues to be, or honestly, in the role that I'm in, I'm more so indoors than I would like to be. Yeah, I definitely didn't see myself doing this type of work, I would say, necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know. I never really thought of myself as being a farmer when I was a kid. So sort of it ends up that way. People just get like brought back to nature, which is, I like it. I'm very happy about it.
I know. I'm like, what was your nature path?
I don't know. Just growing up playing outside a lot. Yeah. I believe we are out of questions for right now. But yeah, as always, Ceci, it was great getting to speak with you and learn more about your organization, all the great work that you're doing. So down at the bottom of the screen, so some of the like social media. So at BK Rot, I believe is for Instagram, bkrot.org as their website. You can learn more about them from there. And then, is there anything else that you would want to add to show the world, pretty much?
I don't think so. Especially like if you have access to composting or are curious about it, I definitely recommend you trying it out. And I think it's something that can be accessible, like from youth to elders, and it's a beautiful activity to like participate in community. And I guess the other thing that I didn't super get into, but maybe I'll share some other benefits of composting real quick. Like climate-wise, composting is a huge supporter in water absorption. So in thinking about, up here in the Northeast, we're going to see increased rainfall, increased precipitation, or flooding events. And so thinking about the more compost we apply to places, or even if we were to fill all of the city's tree pits, amending them with compost, it would support our soils in capturing more water, reducing runoff, and a lot of other issues. Or when we think about areas that are experiencing drought, increasing the organic matter or compost in our soils, again, since it helps retain more water, it'll support conditions for plants to like survive through extreme drought or those conditions. It also helps tree canopies grow wider. And one of my, I think the most amazing, like something that kind of like blew my mind about compost is that it also binds to lead. And so it makes it unavailable for plant roots to take it up. And so it's one of the few natural bioremediators. Like I think like there's different mushrooms that can do it, but in the soil in the city, you see so much vertical growing because our soils are so lead contaminated. And so it's amazing to see BK Rot's compost or other compost to actually be used to regenerate the soil and support the soil, people to be able to grow directly out of the soil again in these lands.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I personally am a big fan of soil and all things related to soil. So yeah, glad you touched on that point. Perfect. So as always, Ceci, it was great to meet you and speak with you today. Yeah, all the work that you and BK Rot is doing is just really exciting to see. It's great to have, more local sort of micro composting units and all those sort of like the environmental benefits that can be drawn from them.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for the conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Perfect. So, all right, everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed getting to have our talk with Ceci today. Getting to learn more about composting and BK Rot in particular. The benefits of composting are like innumerable. There's so many benefits for it, not only for like environment, but also for the community aspects of it as well. So it's great to hear a little bit more about that. So next week is going to be our final week of the series. We're going to be speaking with Andrew Well, who is a beekeeper in Western Massachusetts. So keep an eye out for that, and looking forward to seeing everyone next time.